Welcome to the New Mormon Truth video number 18, a review of A Case for the Book of Mormon Part 2. So this is a review of, or some of my thoughts on the Case for the Book of Mormon by Tad R. Callister, 2019. If you like these videos, please subscribe. And if you like the video, please hit like. So like I said, this is part 2. Part 1, we covered sort of Witness of the Spirit and some authorship theories, and now Callister moves into talking about Book of Mormon acronyms. And an acronym is something that is basically time out of place. He uses the example, and this is a very common example for an acronym, is the clock in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. So there's no way the clock was invented in the Middle Ages. There's no way Julius Caesar looked at a clock. So we would know right away if someone was purporting Julius Caesar to be written at the time of Julius Caesar that it couldn't have been because there are no clocks. And that means the earliest it could have been written would have been the Middle Ages. So scholars use anachronisms to date documents. I think according to them, the thing that people always get wrong are the geopolitical groups. So if they're writing about the past, like 50 years ago, they'll refer to geo or the political group or the area by the current name and not by the name that was known 50 years ago. So, but this would be like you might not have noticed a clock in Julius Shakespeare as being an anachronism. This would be a good, clear example if someone mentioned that they had found a new lost book of the Bible and it mentioned iPhone. You know right away, not possible. Because this, iPhone dates the earliest like 2007, so we know that whoever wrote this earliest it can be written is 2007. So this is what happens with anachronisms. Helps us date it. So Callister then covers what I call past anachronisms, meaning these were things thought to be anachronisms, but now are not. But what Callister does not cover is that when you talk about anachronisms, you need to talk about time and place. So this he does not cover about Book of Mormon geographical theories. Maybe he doesn't want to go down that road, but there are different theories of where where did the Book of Mormon take place? There's different theories. There's all over North and South America. This is called the hemispheric model, meaning sort of like this land southward is South America. Panama, sort of like the narrow neck of land, and the land northward is all like North America. Then scholars, LDS scholars, they said after doing a careful reading of the Book of Mormon, it took place in a very small area, maybe like I think it's like 250 miles long by 150 miles wide, very small area. And most LDS scholars say that it took place in Mesoamerica, and the Nephites were basically like the Maya, or they existed along with the Maya. We don't know. So these are another popular theory is called the U.S. Heartland or the Heartland theory. This basically would turn the Nephites into the Hopewell Indians. That isn't a Hopewell is like I think like there isn't just one group of Hopewell. This is like there's different Hopewell cultures. I'm not an expert on different Native American groups, but basically it would be the Hopewell. But yeah, the Heartland basically puts like it puts Cumorah at the hill Cumorah in New York, and it puts Zarahemla over by Nauvoo, or on the other side of the river, the Mississippi, from Nauvoo. So it takes place more in like central, in the heartland, in the middle of America. That's why it comes up with the heartland theory. Other theories include Peru down South America, because this is the land southward, and most of the Nephites, or most of the Book of Mormon takes place in the land southward, so this would be Peru. I've also seen models on Costa Rica, Baja California, one and more taking place right around New York. I think this is a book written by Phyllis Olive. So, etc. There's a bunch of different models. So my thing is, when you talk about anachronisms, or he's going to show about proof about anachronisms, the date and the place. So the evidence needs to support the location and for the time period of the Book of Mormon. Time period of the Book of Mormon is 600 BC to 400 AD. Okay, so when he starts talking about we need proof for one of where, if the Book of Mormon took place all over in South America, and great. And I think almost maybe that's where he's going with this. It's like the whole hemispheric model, but that's a basic reading. No LDS scholar supports this theory. They support mainly the Mesoamerican theory. Almost all the LDS scholars are Mesoamerican, and there's a few that are, I don't know if they're scholars, but the other popular ones, U.S. Heartland. So basically Mesoamerica, if you don't know. So let's cover these anachronisms. Callister then talks about, at the time of Joseph Smith, the ancient inhabitants of the Americas were believed to be a savage, barbaric, and uncivilized people. In direct contrast to this view, the Book of Mormon speaks of a refined and civilized people. Well, maybe those are the Nephites, but the Lamanites were savage and barbaric. Then he mentions a book called 1491, because remember 1492 is when Columbus discovers America, written by Mann, 2011. This is in the footnotes or the endnotes. He describes a large, thriving cultures in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, the problem with supporting the Book of Mormon is 1491 is not in the time period of the Book of Mormon. It has to be 400 AD, not 1491. Large culture. Sorry. So maybe the right place, the hemispheric, but wrong time. Not proof or support. Then he quotes a Natural Geographic article about Central America civilizations peaking around 1200 years ago. Well, just do the math. That's 800 AD. Sorry, that is not supporting your large civilization because it's 400 years after the Book of Mormon. Seriously, I can't believe it's like simple math. Interesting to note in my comment, since these are some of my thoughts, Joseph's view on Indian origins is consistent with 19th century understanding. The Indians separated, so I'm saying that's 19th century understanding, and some of the night, not all, but in view of the Hebrews, the Indians, the view or the what's written in the view of the Hebrews is the Indians separated from a civilized group. They became savage and destroyed the civilized group. Does that sound familiar? Not to say it's a direct copy, but the Lamanites separated from the Nephites and became savage and destroying the Nephites. So, I dare you to take that general story of the Book of Mormon and apply it to the history of the people. Go look up their history of the Hopewell or whatever group you're talking about and go see if it matches the Book of Mormon history. I bet it does not. Another anachronism he hits upon is metal. And I quote, over a dozen of these metal specimens significantly precede 8900. Remember, they need to be predate 400 AD. In fact, they need to be earlier, because in Alma 11 or 12 we talk about a metal monetary system with gold and silver, and the Jaredites having gold and silver and having metal and stuff like this, or in the BCs. So in the Book of Mormon, and then he says the earliest piece so far notably dates back to around the 1st century in Mexico. Well, this is not the place. This is not. Most Mesoamerican people put it in the Guatemala area. This is too far north. And the 1st century would be I believe that's the Toltecs. Not the right people. I think this was only a copper sheath, as he says it, not, iron swords and gold and silver for trade, blah, blah, blah. The endnote has no endnote for the specimens and no locations or dates. He just sort of says this with no backup material. And then I say, metal, gold, silver, iron, steel is a huge problem for the Book of Mormon. I even believe in 2005 there's a video presentation by John Clark at a fair convention that he actually says metal is a huge problem in the Book of Mormon. That was 2005. I know you're saying, oh, that's more than 10 years ago. It really is. So basically, Go find metal. Go find people that were working metal in, from 600 BC. That does not happen in Mesoamerica. Does not happen in North America. Basically, in North America, they're only ever really doing copper. They don't start doing the other metals in Mesoamerica until 800 AD. The only people really doing metal were the down in South America, like in the Peru area. But there's no LDS scholar that thinks that most of them don't think it happened in Peru. Cement. And he quotes a source saying Mexico in 1st century. Oh, BC maybe. Oh no, that is still the Toltecs, yes. Mexico 1st century AD, but that's the Toltecs, not the Mayan. So he says, oh look, we have evidence of cement. But I hate to tell you, wrong. While the time period is correct, Mexico is not really the right place. So really, he's just sort of picking all over North and South America, this hemispheric model, but no scholar. Only a scholar believes it was all over North and South America. Barley. I think it's sort of the same problem. He talks about that there being examples of barley found in the U.S. states and Mexico. He doesn't provide a date. He only dates it to the Hohokam Native Americans that were there between 300 BC and 1450 AD. He doesn't really date. He's dating this group of Native Americans, but not the barley. And I don't know. I don't know if they're related, because to me the barley is probably not. It perfectly appears when they show up there and when they leave, like they didn't leave the barley behind. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. And number 5, he talks about Alma as a male name. Yes, it was only thought as a female name. They did discover evidence that Alma is a male name. Hey, score one for the LDS apologist. I'm not here to always try to look for errors. This is one that they actually showed to be true. I also believe there's a complaint that the name of Sam in the Book of Mormon was an anachronism. That was then showed also not to be an anachronism. So you know what? When we find something not to be an anachronism, then great. Then he does sort of mention, he goes generally over some of what, and I lump this into, what about all the other anachronisms here? Here's some of the other anachronisms in the Book of Mormon. So he covers a few, but I just showed you that he's not really addressing those anachronisms because he's not really tying it to a location and a date. They don't match. So unless you think, especially the date ones, if it's out of the date, I don't understand why it's not in the book. I can understand if it was in the Book of Mormon time period and in the Book of Mormon time period, but then it's outside of Mesoamerica, so he's almost like putting in the whole Book of Mormon occurred in North-South America, which like I said, most scholars don't believe. So what about all the other anachronisms? And the Book of Mormon mentions horses, cattle, oxen, sheep, swine, goats, and elephants, and these have not been found in at least Mesoamerica. So the one of the hotly disputed ones is horses. Horses weren't really around until the Spanish came over. There were horses, but they died out. But none of these are all known to be brought over by, I think, the Europeans. These did not exist in pre-Columbian America, so before 1492. So they can't be in the Book of Mormon. These did not exist during Book of Mormon times, or no evidence has been found for these. And interesting to note, here are some animals that were in the Book of Mormon times, but not mentioned. Jaguars, monkeys, and llamas. Not mentioned. Whoops, sorry for that. Missing plants, we mentioned barley and wheat. So these are in the Book of Mormon, but no evidence has been found for them. Or they say they found evidence for barley, but I showed you that I don't know. Plants not mentioned, so plants that were in the Book of Mormon times, but not mentioned. Yams, beans, squash. then Callister goes on to say, well, what about the reason for all these haven't been found is that only 1 to 2% of Maya sites have been partially excavated, and none have been fully excavated. So he's saying, hey, you can't. Basically, don't worry, they're going to dig up evidence that because only a small percentage has been dug up. Well, I hate to tell you, you can't dig everywhere for everything, or you can't dig everywhere and everything. So basically, the archaeologists use, they find settlements and they have their methods of where to dig, and you can't dig up an entire city. So they only dig up portions of the city, and they find these spots and they dig them up. So I do believe this subject of only partial things being partially excavated was brought up with a renowned Mesoamericanist, Michael Coe, in an interview maybe about 2 years ago on Mormon Stories, where I believe Michael Ash actually brought this up. And basically, Dr. Coe's, remember, Michael Coe's a Mesoamerican expert. When he heard sort of this philosophy, only, I think they say 5% has been excavated, that he said, oh my God, if you want to dig up 100%, it would take you like 1,000,000 years. So, not to say they're not going to, their knowledge is going to increase, but, they have a basic idea of what's going on with these ancient cultures. If you want more information, go to Archaeology, subheading Where to Dig, at National Geographic. I trust these guys. These guys are scientists. They can tell you that it contains information about how, about archaeological digging. So this is true. Not too much has been excavated. This to me is not, to say, oh, you have to wait. No. Next thing I want to talk about is he talks about chiasm, or chiasmus. What is chiasmus? Well, it's just really parallelism. So when you look at this example from Isaiah 3:18, 19, these words repeat. The words are repeated in inverse order. So humble, humble, little child, natural man, natural man. So the pattern is the word in A is mentioned again, but in reverse order. So they humble themselves and become as little children, atoning blood of Christ, natural man. Then it's repeated natural man, reverse order. This is called a chiasm. In the literary style is called chiasmus. So this literary style, this inverse parallelism. So it's parallelism, but you can see it's done in reverse order. Like English would have rhyming. So the assertion is that because chiasms are found in the Book of Mormon, it is a sign of divine origin because, one, chiasmus is a strong sign of Hebraic origin, because we know Nephi and them came out of Jerusalem and they're a Hebrew origin. And Smith and others did not know about chiasmus in the 1820s. So the Book of Mormon contains chiasmus, and Smith didn't know about it. How could he create chiasms if he was writing it himself? So this is a clear sign that it's divine origin or ancient origin. Well, the problem is chiasmus is also found in ancient Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, also found in the Quran. Chiasms are also found in Shakespeare, so now we move on to English. If they're saying that no one knew about it in 1820, obviously to them, Shakespeare couldn't have known about it. But chiasms are found in Shakespeare. So I want to say this is just a literary style. It does not prove ancient origin or that it's Hebraic. That's what I'm really getting at. 2, it's also found in the King James Bible, Old and New Testament. Remember? Sorry, I got interrupted. Chiasms are also found in the King James Bible, also Old and New Testament. So if you think about it, it's English translation. So when they're translating, if chiasm was not known, this parallelism, King James Bible, 1611, so they're just translating, sort of doing a literal translation, so it would show up in the English translation. Also shows up in manuscripts found by Spalding. This is a Spalding manuscript in 1812. It also shows up in the late war. I believe that chiasm is 14 levels deep, meaning you saw that A, B, C, D, so it goes like A, B, C, D, 14 in and out. So if they're saying it didn't exist, this person who wrote the late war was able to do a 14 level deep chiasm. Yeah, the problem is it wasn't really known as chiasmus. It was known as parallelism. And if you look at Quinn's Early Mormonism in the Magical Worldview, page 499 to 504, you'll see that there was a publications on this Hebrew parallelism. The first book had a printing in 1787, the next one 1816, and there's another book, I think this was Horn's Critical Commentary or something like that, published in 1825, 1827. You actually, this book was somewhat popular. It has multiple editions showing that people are buying it. So just to shows that Smith could easily have gotten the, he read a lot in the Bible. He could have easily been, if you're copying, since it uses the King James language, if he's emulating the King James language, he may be copying, and then he may be, accidentally copying, or maybe knowingly, since he could have knowledge of it, since there were publications on this chiasmus or parallelism. So basically, chiasm does not show Hebraic origin, and the knowledge of it was around. And two, there's actually other documents in English that precede this knowledge that show chiasmus. So basically, there's no argument there. And parallels, I sort of covered this already before. Critics are quick to list the parallels between these two books, the Book of Mormon and the Hebrews, but they fail to list any of the book's obvious and significant unparallels or differences, details, and themes that are essential. So I think I covered this. He covers view of the Hebrews, the late war, and I thought he maybe covered the first book, Napoleon. Apparently he didn't. So, and remember, I'm just going with view of the Hebrews. Maybe provided a framework, and the late war in the first book, Napoleon, just provided stylistic wording. Not that he was borrowing storylines. And then he talks about the nature of God. Critics claim that when Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon, he expressed a Trinitarian view of the Godhead. No, the Book of Mormon teaches modalism, which is one God revealed in three modes or aspects: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If you want more information, go see video number 5 of mine. Does the Book of Mormon teach the Mormon concept of God? Nope, it doesn't. It teaches modalism. DNA and more partial truths. DNA. The problem is DNA studies, however, have suggested that most Native Americans have primarily Asian DNA. Well, hold on. The DNA, so Native Americans have Asian DNA, because most members believe that the Native Americans were direct descendants of the Lamanites. So if Americans were direct descendants of Lamanites, they would have Hebrew DNA, or Middle Eastern DNA, and that the Book of Mormon peoples were the only ones in the Americas during its recorded history. But then Callister says, but the Book of Mormon does not make such claims. So it is true. If you believe that the Native Americans were direct descendants of the Lamanites, and the Book of Mormon people were the only people in the Americas, then yeah, this would be a very fatal blow to find out, because this means you better find Middle Eastern DNA, and you find basically Native Americans have Asian DNA. Basically, as people came out of Africa, they sort of they first sort of moved over to the Middle East and Asia. There's a group that went into Europe, but basically, like, the people that moved in the Middle East went to sort of like India, and then went over to over like Russia by Alaska. Then after the Ice Age, those people then moved into North and South America. This is why they have Asian DNA. It's because they sort of moved along that line down into the Americas. They didn't come over on boats from the Middle East. There's none of that has ever been found. But Callister is saying the Book of Mormon doesn't make this claim. In fact, LDS scholars will say that the Nephi, they came over in these ships, and they intermixed with the native populations. And they have reasons why all the Middle Eastern DNA got lost. So, and he only spends 1.5 pages on DNA, but it's a big issue. To me, he's just sort of scratching the surface, trying to provide you with a quick answer. I'm like, really? A page and a half on the DNA? And hopefully I'll make a future video on DNA. Doctrinal gems. Callister says, where did Joseph Smith get his doctrine? Callister points out that the Book of Mormon states many of the plain and precious things which have been taken out of the book, the Bible. It's from 1 Nephi 13:19. The loss of the plain and precious truths has caused most of the Christian world to stumble on many key doctrinal issues. Fortunately, the Book of Mormon has come to the rescue. It clarifies certain doctrinal points that are ambiguous in the Bible, confirms others, and even more importantly, fills in many of the gaps and voids that are glaringly apparent. So the Book of Mormon, it's, corrects, restores the plain and precious truths and fills in the gaps. Where did Joseph Smith, an unlearned guy, get all these doctrinal things? He wasn't a theologian, right? Well, remember, there was a religious disagreement between Joseph Smith, or Smith Sr. and Lucy. Joseph Smith lived in what was called the Burned Over District, an area known for revivals and new religious movements. So the area was sort of like on fire religiously. From Joseph Smith's own history, though I, Joseph, attended their several meetings, he's talking about the Methodist, Baptist, and Presbyterian, and I highlight Presbyterian because part of the family members would join the Presbyterian Church. As often, I attended their several meetings as often as occasion would permit, meaning he's attending religious meetings. He's just sitting there. In process of time, my mind became somewhat partial to the Methodist sect. So he's going, where did he get these? Well, he's attending their meetings. And then from Joseph Smith's 1832 history, which you can find at the Joseph Smith Papers, or go read in Early Mormon Documents, Volume 1, page 27 and 29. So basically says at age 12, he's saying, I'm trying to shorten it and avoid long quotes. At age 12, Joseph became concerned for the welfare of my immortal soul. He began searching the scriptures. This meaning he's searching the scriptures, and his intimate acquaintance with those of different denominations led me to marvel exceedingly. Intimate acquaintance. So he knows, this basically, he's been looking at the different denominations. This continued till age 15, 3 years, when he concluded that there was no society or denomination that was built upon the gospel of Jesus Christ. So he's reading the scriptures for 3 years, talking to people of different denominations, and then it comes in conclusion there's no denomination built on the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, it sounds like he was studying religion for at least 3 years, if not longer. And Alexander Campbell, remember from the video of part 1. So this is in the article Delusions in the Millennial Harbinger, 1831. Long quote. This prophet Smith, through his stone spectacles, and I would just put in brackets the Urim and Thummim, probably, wrote on the plates of Nephi, meaning, he thought Smith was the author, in his Book of Mormon, every error and almost every truth discussed in New York for the last 10 years. Basically, he's saying all the doctrine of the Book of Mormon is everything that's been discussed in New York for the last 10 years. So he's basically saying the doctrine of the Book of Mormon is the doctrine from the environment. He decides all the great controversies, and then he lists them. And if you go look down this list and see what Callister talks about in his book, you're going to find many parallels. What he says, these were restored. Infant baptism, or just baptism, ordination, the Trinity, or maybe the nature of God, regeneration, repentance, justification, the fall of man, the atonement, transubstantiation, fasting, penance, church government, religious experience, the call to the mystery, the general resurrection, the eternal punishment, who should be baptized, and even the question of Freemasonry, Republican government, and the rights of man. All these topics are repeatedly alluded to. Where did Smith get his doctrines? From the environment. Three witnesses. And then he goes on to talk about the three witnesses. At all stages of the witnesses' lives, their testimonies are consistent in the sense that they affirm that they saw the angel or plates or both, and consistent in the sense that they never denied their testimony. And then 2 pages later, so basically saying, hey, the witnesses never, they always said they saw the angel and plates or both, and never denied their testimony. They say they, critics, point out that some of the witnesses, these are the three witnesses, so we're talking Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, and David Whitmer, were treasure hunters. We know Martin Harris was. Oliver Cowdery was a rod guy, so he searched for treasure. And we know David Whitmer used seer stones. So not that they were, he says, and perhaps gold. Well, no, they were all treasure hunters. And usually, what I just mentioned, usually these people had like visionary type stuff. I think I have a bullet on that. That they were excommunicated. Well, two were excommunicated. Cowdery and Harris were excommunicated, and Whitmer left. That some, well, I think it's excommunicated from the church. I just deleted that. And that some joined multiple churches. Yes, Harris went on to join multiple churches between when he was excommunicated around 1838 and came back. Multiple churches, and Cowdery actually joined the Methodist Church. Does this sound like, tell me, if you saw an angel, God came down and told you the Book of Mormon was true, and you saw the plates, why would you go join a different church? I could see you saying, oh, the church excommunicated me unfairly, but why are you out joining other churches? They allege that there were some inconsistency in their testimonies, I haven't read them all, and that they did not see the golden plates, but only had a spiritual vision or faith-based experience. And that's sort of the point, is that the three witnesses were from a visionary background before the Book of Mormon. Is that all these guys, Smith says that Cowdery saw the plates in vision before he met him. Cowdery was also Rodman into treasure hunting, and these usually had like spirit guardians and that type of stuff. Harris was known for seeing like ghosts and stuff. Not to say these people were lying, but they had, they all came from this visionary background. So for them to see a vision was not something, would be unremarkable to them. So it could just be a visionary experience. And maybe I might have said in one of my other videos is that during this Second Great Awakening, during these revivals, people would report seeing Christ in vision. So if you're going to believe Joseph Smith saw God, why aren't you believing all the other visionary accounts at the time of the Second Great Awakening? Why are they not true? So, but you're going to say, oh, well, they just, for them not to be true, you'd have to say, oh, they were just seeing things. They didn't really see it. They just saw it in their heads. Well, but these people also never, with those other visionary, they're not lying to you. They think they saw that. So there's nothing wrong. The witnesses never denied their testimony, because if they did see it in vision, they saw it in vision. They're not lying. More on this to come in a future video. Other topics. He discusses the 8 witnesses. He discusses the atonement in Christ's divinity, basically what I call another testament of Jesus Christ. He discusses, does the Bible prophesy of the Book of Mormon? And then he talks about gaining a personal testament of the Book of Mormon by a spiritual witness, as described in Moroni 4. This is with my summary of it. Basically, it's going back to the beginning of the book of the spiritual witness. So then what I call my case against the Book of Mormon, my summary at the end after going through all this, is if the Book of Mormon happened and it wasn't fiction, it had to happen somewhere. Basically, there's no evidence of ancient origin, meaning there's a lack of archaeological evidence. Where did it take place? There's all these models out there, and the reason they can't, If there was evidence somewhere, people would be believing that model, but they aren't believing any model because there's really no evidence. Lack of DNA evidence, that would have been a good thing. Basically, if you don't know, when they came up with the theories of Indian origin, that they were, before they had DNA, they sort of could look at, how they looked and their customs and everything, and they sort of could trace them back to Asia. That's where they developed the theories, and then DNA only confirmed it. Well, guess what? If you're saying, oh, they were the Mayan, well, they went and tested the ancient Mayans, and none of them had Middle Eastern DNA. So basically, any group they point to and they test, they don't have DNA evidence. And of course, the Eleogists have reasons why there's no DNA evidence. Like I said, future video. But there is evidence of modern origin. So there's a lack of evidence of ancient origin, but there is evidence of modern origin. So anachronisms, there's anachronism, metal, wrong, there's no metals anachronistic, wrong plants, wrong animals, etc. It has 19th century views of Indian origins, has 19th century philosophy in the Book of Mormon. So what do you say? So when I go back to basing your faith on correct knowledge, basically lack of evidence, and the evidence, you have to base it upon correct information. Lack of evidence and evidence. So that's why I say the case against the Book of Mormon is there's basically a lack of evidence of ancient origin, and there's evidence of modern origin. Therefore I say Book of Mormon is of modern origin. Thank you. That's it for this video.